Grandmasters, Mike Amori, WCA. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I don't know what time you're listening to this. Week 6 update. Miss Serena playing the black pieces, Chess Kid Online, playing against Buckhouse Boss, an 1141. Two very good players. Serena's a 2 o'clock student, plays the French defense. We've seen a couple of her games from the tournaments. What is the French? Pawn e6 on move 1. Now, why is there a diagonal there? Because a lot of you, after e4, you're getting used to seeing the move e5, which is very common, isn't it? Except as you move up into reserve, into championship, into future masters, you're going to see a whole bunch of things that black can do on move 1. So here, after e4, Serena with e6 is playing what's known to be a French. So that diagonal is to remind you, as a French player, you're not going to have the same problems on the square of doom down here on f7. So many of us get mated because of this square. For example, after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, you see the bishop come to c4. You see what that bishop's pointing at? Yeah, the square of doom. If you're a two knights defense player, you might get hit with knight g5, and white is trying to get you into like fried liver positions. So if you play the French on move 1, white usually plays d4, and then black hits back in the center with d5. So if you get those two pawn moves in, that diagonal and the square of doom down here is completely safe. It's very hard for white to get two pieces on that square from this position. So you might ask, why does anyone ever play any opening except the French? Well, there's reasons for that. The French is a real opening. I mean, grandmasters of all levels play the French. It's a great opening. But there is a little bit of a downside. On move 2 here, you kind of have a bad bishop. Can you see who's going to have a problem getting into the game? Yeah, it's this guy down here. And there are some other issues too. This knight could have some problems, as you'll see in Serena's game, but she knows how to handle it. If you don't, you can get into a lot of trouble. So the French isn't the perfect answer. No opening move is. You have to follow opening principles. Develop the minor pieces. Watch the pawn structure. Fight for the center. Castle. You know all that stuff. Okay, let's watch the game. Knight d2. Interesting idea. You could play knight c3 as well to protect this pawn. You also could take on this square, but white was not interested in taking. White wanted to develop. If you play knight c3, you could get hit with bishop b4. And this, by the way, is the topic of the 4 o'clock video today by coincidence. But anyway, her opponent played knight d2 because if you play bishop to b4 now, you're just going to get hit with pawn c3 and you're going to waste the tempo. So what does Serena do? She plays knight f6 and she puts more pressure on the pawn in the middle. And her opponent decides to advance the pawn. This is known as the Tarish variation. You kind of don't need to know that. You do need to know the ideas if you were black. Now, you might say to me, hey, I don't play the French. Well, you kind of do, because sometimes the pawn structure you get, like the one you're looking at here, you didn't mean to get. You just kind of made some move orders and you ended up with a position. Well, you can't call timeout and tell your opponent, look, I don't know what to do. Let's start over. No. So what does Serena do with that knight? Pause your video. What would you do with it? Okay, she plays knight f to d7. And you'll see in this line in the French that all of these minor pieces, it appears they don't have great squares. And that's really true right now because the pawns, these two in the middle here on d4 and e5, are hurting this bishop. They're taking away a lot of good squares. Again, b4 doesn't do anything. Also, the knight can't come to c5. It looks like it can come to b6, but it doesn't look so great yet, right? So what's Serena doing? Well, she's just following what any other grandmaster would do. How can she get away with this? Well, the two pawns in the middle of the board are completely locking things up, which means she has time to go and work out of this. These two pawn wedges here have to be broken by black. So in the game, white played knight f3, and Serena played the correct idea. She broke the center with c5. Okay, so let me go back to this one for again. There's these really strange highlights on the board. Those two I'll take away because they were the ones that the bishop couldn't use. But let's go back to these four. Do you see the pawn wedges? And again, keep in mind, what is a pawn wedge? I'll leave these two on. Any two pawns that are bumping heads from different teams. You see how they're kind of bumping heads straight on? They can't just be moved out of the way. They're like walls. So what do? You need to break them. And that's what Serena did. She played c5. Her opponent played c3 to support the center. And here she makes an interesting decision and plays a move that's not too common, although it has been played before. She played pawn to a6. Now, normally players of her strength who play moves like a6 do it to prevent bishops from bothering knights or to attack bishops. So the main move in this position is for black to put pressure on this square. So they bring this knight out to c6. They'll bring this queen to b6, and they'll use those two pieces to support that pawn break. If she plays knight c6 and does get hit by that bishop, you see all of those pawns for white that are up there highlighted. That means this bishop up here on c1 is not so great. I mean, right now it can't move at all. The light squared bishop for white, very often in the French defense, turns out to be a super piece because it can't get fought or battled against by his opponent on the other side. So Serena's bishop, her light square bishop, is completely buried. So if white trades that piece off, for example, let's say Serena continues with queen b6. If white trades their good bishop, black's going to take back with the pawn. Now, don't be afraid of these doubled pawns because this is a cool one. I like this. Let's say white castles. Now you can double break. This pawn started on c7. It's already on c5. So let's take the center. If they keep a pawn in the middle, we just strike back again. And you see how these light squares open up? Believe it or not, you're playing the French. This is usually a bad piece. Well, look at a couple of more captures. Let's say knight b3. How about bishop a6 now? Remember that bad bishop that was there a minute ago? Look at that thing. Absolute monster. So if she played a6 back here to prevent that bishop move, she probably could have got away with something else. All right, she played a6. Not the end of the world. Bishop to d3. Now knight c6. Castles. And Serena's putting pressure after queen b6 on the center like she's supposed to. Okay, her opponent makes a strange move here. A knight g5. It's really not a bad move because it is going to put pressure on f7. You see the big mama can come to f3 or h5 and pressure this square. So trust me, black has to be careful here. But there is the question of whether or not black can steal a pawn in the middle. And Serena may have been cautious because she might not want her knight to get attacked, or she feels undeveloped. So that could be the reason why she didn't go for this. But it appears here she could have gotten away with the pawn and tried to hang on, get the rest of her pieces out, and play the position of pawn up. She probably would come under some pressure, though. Okay, what she did instead after knight g5 is she attacked it with her bishop. All is still good. And then she gets hit with queen h5. And here is where she got into a little bit of trouble. All right, after queen h5, the threat is obvious. You're being attacked on f7. Can she castle? A lot of times you can castle to protect that square. Would that work in this position? I hope you said no. Game is over. checkmate. Okay? Yeah, not good. So she can't castle. So she has to deal with queen h5. One thing she can try here is the move g6, kicking the queen, gaining a tempo, and if the queen tries to take advantage of all these dark squares that opened up, she has this cool little maneuver, bishop f8, undeveloping the bishop, and when the bishop runs away, and then she can just fianchetto her bishop. And the bishop does a really nice job of covering these dark squares. Now, what she did in the game is she took the knight, but by taking the knight, she's giving up her good bishop because, as you'll see, most of her pawns are on light squares and her remaining bishop is completely out of play. So by taking, the queen took back and now pressures the g pawn. Could she play g6? Yes, she can. However, if she plays g6 now, you see those dark squares? They're really weak. And here after g6, I don't know, maybe it's white that might want to open the game up. I don't know, maybe you take back with your knight. Why do they want to open the game? Two bishops left up here. Yeah, can you guys see that? Okay, so after queen takes g5, here Serena just makes a mistake and she plays h6. Her idea is good. She wants to kick the queen, except the queen just jumped in and grabbed the pawn, and now she has some issues. Rook f8, not to lose the rook, and I like white's move a lot. Instead of grabbing a pawn over here on h6, white played knight f3. And knight f3 is a really strong move because it opens up the bishop on c1. So we have to give white some credit here, not to rush, but bring more pieces into the game. The other problem for Serena is going to be it's very difficult to break these wedges now. Because the center is completely closed up, white is going to have time to attack on this side of the board. All right, so she traded in the middle, and white ignored that pawn and took here because it hits the rook twice, even though there is protection from this knight. And at this point, Serena's in a little bit of trouble. She tried to grab a pawn up here with her queen, but then white just continued taking in the middle. They went for a trade, and here queen g4 was played. That was a mistake. Queen g4 was a mistake. If you go back after knight d4, white had a much stronger move. Can you guys find it? Yeah. Move is knight g5. Oops, sorry. You have knight d5, g5 in this position, completely opening up this side of the board with threats. What to do from here? You see how the rooks are going to be coming into the game. All sorts of pressure just coming in the board like this. After the move, instead of knight g5, after queen g4, black can get out of this. Black is actually in decent shape. Serena missed her chance. She played the move knight f5, which got her in trouble, and we'll look at how. But after queen g4, you see how the bishop is attacking the rook? So white has a good idea. But can you see how Serena can make it much better than it was a minute ago? Yeah, she can trade the knight because it's check. And when the queen takes back, get this rook, maybe bother the bishop. If the bishop bothers you, you bother the bishop back. Maybe the bishop plunks itself in here, but you might just be able to get away with some trades. And even though you're not castled, if you get this queen out of here, you might actually be okay. So how would you get that queen out of there, by the way? Who's going to chase her away? You can't do it with the rook. You can't do it. You guys see why. There's a bishop here. But how about the move queen a3? That's kind of interesting. Maybe you can bring it in here, challenge the queen, and maybe, just maybe, get away with this. Okay, let's look at the game. After knight f5, however, we have in this position, she started to lose some material. So the bishop took the rook down at the bottom, the knight took back, and here white is not only making trades because they're up in material, bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop. They're making the trades because it's really ripping open the board. Cool move by white, queen to g7, keeping pressure on the knight so the king can't just run away somewhere. Serena develops, and then in comes the knight to g5 again, attacking this square. Serena decided to give it up by castling. She could have played bishop to e6, but I don't know, maybe she was afraid of this rook coming in here and grabbing that pawn after the queen moves, so she just decided to castle, but then got into some more trouble here. So after knight takes f7, so white is really playing well. There's not much she can do at this point, and she tried to hang on a little bit. She moved her rook so the knight wouldn't capture, but the knight just forked her, so she was kind of in trouble here. King b8, and then knight took the rook at the bottom. She took back, and then the queen just took the knight, and now the bishop's hanging. So she took the pawn to protect the bishop, and then black played the move rook f to e1. And after you play rook f to e1 here, you guys should all see that that diagonal's too much. The file, rather. Okay? So listen, I'm going to call it quits here. She played a really good game. This kid was played well, too, with white. He played really well. But I hope you learned something about pieces to keep in the pawn structures, how to develop quickly, what squares to look out for. Like, one more time, I'll leave you with this reminder. After c3, can you guys see the pressure that black is already putting on that square? Yeah, keep it up. Keep the pressure. Knight c6, queen b6, and keep fighting for that square. All right? I'll see you birds on Sunday.